welcome back to another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode. And wow, do we have a bunch to talk about from last weekend at Orlando? Oh my goodness. What a wild weekend of racing, to say the least. Both Craftsman and Cup did not disappoint. And specifically, we'll start off with the Publix 200, that dramatic finish. That's always going to be an iconic photo. You have Braden Bennett, Diego Orkedi, and Cameron Atwood three wide on the run to the start finish line. And Cameron Atwood ends up coming out on top, snapping his 31 race winless drought, potentially his final win with CJ Barrymore Racing. We also got to talk about that finish from the perspective of Bennett and Diego Orkedi. They had a heated altercation post race. It wasn't punches thrown, but a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, a lot of torn up sheet metal. Is this the next big ASCA rivalry? We'll talk about that. We also got to talk about the home hero, the St. Petersburg native himself. Caden Dunham had quite the eventful Saturday night. We'll break all of that down for you. As I mentioned, we'll also break down the Craftsman Series race. Will Moon becoming the first series regular to win in 2027. Does this put him in title contention? We'll go over silly season briefly. Marcus Edwards not returning to Dexter Andrews Motorsports in 2028. And we'll talk about what that means for his ASCA future. And then we'll preview. We go from one short track to another one, just on a completely different side of the country. It's Belltown Speed Park upcoming this week. Full Craftsman and Cup Series preview. But first, before we get into it, we got to shout out the ASCA's Discord server. Scroll down, click that link in bio, and join because we got over 100 members. We talk everything sports, everything racing, and specifically everything ASCA. The Discord was bumping during that insane finish last Saturday night. And if you want to join in and catch a watch party during one of these races, click that link in bio and join the server to chat with, as I mentioned, over 100 members currently in the Discord. And then also we got to shout out Circle B Diecast / Plan B sales. Use coupon code ASCA for reduced shipping on any orders $30 or more inside the US. So without further ado, let's get into it. And apologies to Cameron Atwood, but we're going to put your win on the back burner for a second, and we're going to circle back to it. Because first off, we got to talk about Braden Bennett and Diego Orkedi. And this is a battle between two drivers we really haven't seen much yet. We've obviously seen Brady Bennett versus Todd Kidd for the championship last year. The year before, we saw Todd Kidd versus Diego Orkedi. So it's natural that now we're going to get to see Brady Bennett versus Diego Orkedi because Orkedi specifically, he obviously had the worst year of his career last year as Bennett went on his title run and made his push to ASCA superstardom. So these two really haven't battled on track that much. And boy, it was definitely worth the wait seeing them go at it on Saturday night because they're no holds bar, elbows out, physical action. These two do not like each other. I don't know if they liked each other before this race, but it's certainly safe to say they don't like each other after this race. And I definitely hope we get to see more of this throughout the campaign. They might not battle for the championship. Hopefully, we do get to see that at some point. A Bennett versus Diego full season title fight because that would be even more spicy than a Kidd versus Orkedi title fight at this point. But these two don't like each other, and let's break down what happened at the end of this race. We'll break down the entire final stint. So Diego Orkedi obviously takes the race lead, and he's holding the race lead until the caution comes out for Dunham and Bowden getting together. Of course, we'll break all of that down later on in this show. But Brandon Bennett's pit crew gets him the lead coming out of the pits ahead of Orkedi. So it's Bennett, Orkedi, and then Atwood lining up third on the restart. I think it's Greg Healy in fourth. We go back to green. Bennett cuts off Orkedi, like he chops his nose off basically, exiting turn one. And I think that's where things got a little bit feisty. I don't think Diego was too pleased by that. We didn't hear his radio communications, but I don't think he was too happy about that because Bennett cut it extremely close to clear Orkedi on the exit of turn one. But I mean, Bennett's defense, he had to do that. If he let Orkedi come back around the outside, that's a lot of valuable time he's losing. Plus, him chopping Orkedi's nose off also opened the door for Cameron Atwood to get side by side and eventually pass Orkedi on the exit of turn three, which made Diego's job that much harder in the final stint. It bought Bennett about, I would say, 20 or so laps where Orkedi was kind of just stuck behind Atwood and trying to find a way by, and eventually Diego got sick and tired of it and just put the chrome horn to the back of Atwood's rear bumper and moved him out of the way as they crossed the stripe for like 21 laps to go. And that's when Diego really started to set sail on Braden Bennett. And you got to give a lot of credit to this 11 team and to the 17 team, and we will in a second. But specifically the 11 team, because Bennett clearly did not have the pace at all to be in race win contention. Early portion of the race, he could not keep up with the CJ Barrymore racing boys of Caden Dunham and Cameron Atwood. Middle portion of the race, he couldn't keep up with Diego Orkedi. But you know what? They kept taking him swings at it. His crew chief, Fred Book, kept making adjustments. Then the pit crew gets him the race lead, and Bennett really did all he could. He said it himself. The whole race, he was driving right on the limit to try to keep these guys at bay. And yeah, he was on the limit. You could clearly see it, especially in the later portions of the race. Like he was, especially the final lap as well. He was getting every last thing he could out of that number 11. He left it all on the table. But you could clearly see once Diego got by Cameron Atwood, who the faster car was, and it was not a matter of if, but when he was going to get to the back bumper of Braden Bennett. And eventually that did happen coming to the white flag lap. And this is where things get spicy. So Diego, he puts the bumper to Bennett exiting turn one, gets him up the racetrack, sticks his nose up the inside. They're side by side down the front stretch, heading down into turn two. And then Bennett, you got to admit here, he did try to pinch Orkedi down. It wasn't nearly as blatant as what he did to Todd Kidd for the championship last year. And again, I'm not going to fault Bennett for what he did. I'm not going to dig that whole scenario up. That's been done and dusted in the past. But I can understand why Todd Kidd fans were saying karma on Twitter to what happened to Braden Bennett. Some way, I know Todd Kidd had to have been smiling, seeing what happened. To Bennett getting shoved up the track by Orkedi because he did try to pinch. Bennett did try to pinch Diego down a bit, entering the quarter, and tried to force him to back off that way. Diego, of course, final lap, he's having absolutely none of it. He sends it into the corner, sends Bennett up the track. They make contact for the first time, and Diego thinks, okay, I'm by, right? Not quite, because Bennett, he didn't care that he got outside off the track. He kept his foot in it around the outside. And I think that caught Diego off guard, especially on the exit of turn three, because Diego could not get to the throttle the way he wanted to because Bennett was on his outside. And that allowed Bennett to kind of recover and fight back with a big run off the corner. And that's where they make contact again. Bennett gets into the wall. And then Cameron Atwood comes out of nowhere, takes him 3 wide. I don't even think Diego knew that Atwood was that close behind him, because if he did, I think he would have tried to block that move by Atwood a lot better than what he did. But Atwood just takes him 3 wide down the front stretch, makes the pass on both, and steals the victory. And as I mentioned, it's elbows out action. It's feisty. It's spicy. It's all the words in the book. just incredible stuff between two incredible talents. And I get Braden Bennett's frustration. I get Diego Orkedi's frustration. The fact of the matter is, it's short track racing, man. Rubbin's racing, tempers flaring, beating and banging. That is textbook short track racing. And that is a textbook Orlando finish. I think that's easily the best finish we've seen, specifically at the cup level at Orlando since 2020. Like, it's been a really long time. I know it wasn't a photo finish, but that is obviously going to be one that goes down in the history books as straight up iconic. And I'm really interested to see. Unfortunately, Diego's not that good at Belltown, because I would be really interested to see those two go at it again next week. But I don't think that's probably going to happen. Bennett's going to be right up front, and Diego is going to be fighting just to not get lapped. But yeah, that was fantastic stuff between those two. The post race, obviously, I just think that was emotions kind of boiling over. I definitely think that's how they both feel about each other, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. That they don't like each other. Clearly, they don't like one another, and yeah, that's not going to change. But it's just, that was fantastic stuff at the end of the race. And yeah, Orlando, you did not disappoint with the tempers flaring, and we still got a bunch more to talk about in terms of beating and banking and crossing that fine line between short track racing and, okay, that's just bush league. But let's talk about Cameron Atwood. We got to give him his flowers. Nearly 2-year winless drought Atwood was on, and it's finally over. The 31 race winless drought is no more. I actually think it's 32 races, so I'm not sure why everyone's been saying 31. But it's been nearly 2 years since Atwood reached victory lane, and yeah, just being right place, right time. And this is a 17 team that had fallen as far back as 7 in the second half of this race. Like, they were really, really, really struggling after the halfway point. And you could tell Atwood said it himself. It felt like, they flipped a switch and the car went off. It wasn't driving well. He was going nowhere. He was stuck in quicksand, going backwards. Everyone was passing him. But you know what? This team, they kept their foot down. Rookie crew chief Adam Seinbach has had his moments this season, but he got it together. He made some good adjustments. The pit crew got it together on the final pit stop. They got him back out third. They gave him a shot. And that's all you can really ask for if you're Atwood. And I think that any questions about whether or not Atwood would mail the rest of the season in, specifically after announcing so early that he wouldn't be returning to CJ Barrymore Racing. Like, he announced that directly after the season opener. I'm not coming back to this team for next season. So it'd be very easy for him to kind of mail it in. But this is a cup champion who wants to be named the highest paid driver in the sport. And Atwood certainly proved last night exactly why he should be. Just the way he battled back, he never gave up. And specifically the past couple weeks, he was sitting 23rd in points after West Virginia. That was a terrible race for that team. They were 19th, 2 laps down at West Virginia, that is. And the past couple weeks, they battled back. They've shown a ton of speed, and now obviously they have a win to show for it. And Atwood, believe it or not, is the first driver not from Ronnie Woods Motorsports to win a race this season. Who had that on their bingo card to open the 2027 campaign? So yeah, it's outstanding stuff from Atwood, and certainly it helps the stock on the open market as well. Like, there's no better way to ensure you're going to be the highest paid driver in the sport other than winning races and beating the newly minted highest paid driver in the sport, for that matter, in Braden Bennett. So yeah, definitely great stuff from Atwood. Huge win for him and CJ Barrymore Racing, specifically the organization. From an organizational perspective, you lose Ian Adonde very early on. You obviously lose Caden Dunham towards the second half of the race. Like all that speed they brought to the racetrack this weekend, it was looking like it was going to be all for naught with Atwood fading towards the end of the race, but he battles back and he's right place, right time to pounce when Bennett and Orkedi get a little too feisty for their own britches. And yeah, Atwood ends up in victory lane. So again, it's a huge win for that team. Career win number 11 for Cameron Atwood. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do the rest of the season. Specifically, we'll see if he's able to keep it up at Belltown, potentially go back to back. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, definitely a lot to be optimistic about if you're a Cameron Atwood or if you're a CJ Barrymore racing fan in general. Apologies if you're hearing more sniffles this episode. Just kind of been feeling under the weather, but I had to get this episode up talking about Orlando. It was too good of a weekend to completely skip. But let's get to the big elephant in the room: the good, the bad, and the ugly of Caden Dunham. And I've given this kid a lot of praise on the show this season because he's been fantastic. He's opening 5 races. We've had this discussion. He should have been third in points entering this week had he not blown a motor at the Stone Yard. He drove from 23rd to 5th there. Again, I can't get over that because that's something that should not be possible for a 19-year-old kid to do. And that's the good. The bad is the radio. The radio outbursts are getting ridiculous at this point. I mean, every 2 seconds, I feel like I'm listening to the broadcast. Just Dunham airing out his crew chief, airing out his spotter, airing out his pit crew. I mean, the whining from him this season. And at this point, it has become just whining over the littlest things. I mean, even a pep talk. His crew chief, Rick Stevens, tries to give him a pep talk after his first reprimand for the incident with Chris Barrymore last night. And Dunham says, no more radio the rest of the race. Like, at some point, I can't say what Dunham was acting like, but it's just being a douchebag, and there's no need to act like that, specifically to your own team that's trying to help you out, trying to, help you win. And it's just, like I said, that's the bad. The good is the on-track performance. Dunham has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt he is the real deal. He has superstar potential. We know that. The bad, the radio outbursts, the whining, and the ugly was last night. Let's face facts, guys. Caden Dunham has absolutely no idea how to deal with adversity whatsoever. And because we talked about it briefly with Cameron Atwood, that's how you deal with adversity, how Cameron Atwood managed it. Because we talked about it. The second half of this race, the track temperature drops dramatically from the first half, where the sun is still out, the sun is starting to set or whatever. So the track temperature is much higher. And the CJ Barrymore racing cars had a bunch of grip all weekend because they're racing in the high track temperature. They're racing. They practiced during the day, they qualified during the day, the race started during the day, and then eventually transitioned to the night. So as the night wore on and the track temperature dropped, I should say, the CJ Barrymore racing cars weren't properly keeping up with the track, and their speed, their pace started to fall off. And that began with Diego Orkedi passing Dunham for the race lead, because Dunham led the opening 126 laps basically unchallenged until Orkedi pulled up to the party and spoiled, ironically, the man who idolized him so much growing up. Dunham had such a dominant race, and how ironic that Diego ended up passing him for the race lead. I definitely do want to see, side note, I definitely do want to see a lot more Diego versus Dunham battles, just because of that dynamic of Dunham racing his boyhood idol. And Diego, I think, for his credit, he raced Dunham a lot cleaner than he races a lot of other guys in this sport. Like, he gave Dunham a nudge out of the corner, but it's not like he races it's not like he raced Braden Bennett towards the end of the race. And I get it's two completely different scenarios, but if that was Todd Kidd or if that was Braden Bennett in that situation, I think he stuffs either of them in the wall, or he's much more egregious with his chrome arm usage. Like he just gave Dunham a little nudge out of the way and scooted on by without incident. So you can tell, you can see the respect between those two. And that's, like I said, I wanted to see many more battles between them. But again, Dunham's reaction over the radio is that his car is mid now, and just he's not helping his crew chief Rick Stevens in providing information on why is the car mid, what's it doing wrong. He's not helpful there. And then the ugly is that just despicable, absolutely reprehensible incident with Doug Bowden. And let me just say this. I think the ASCA got it wrong with the punishment for the Bowden incident. Only probation through November 12th. Are you serious? I think that it needs to be taken into account the situation that Doug Bowden and Tico Bowden Motorsports are in. This is a team that filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy before the season even started. So they're on thin ice. They're on their last legs. And Bowden is carrying this organization inside the top five, carried them all the way up to this battle for second place compared to a fully funded Dunham and CJ Barrymore racing outfit. I know they're not top tier like Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Michael I Racing and Orkedi Bros Racing. Like they're a tier below that, but this is still a multi-time championship winning organization. They have a championship winning driver in their lineup in Cameron Atwood. Like this is no pushover organization. You get my point. Like they're fully funded compared to TBM on their last legs, a ton of uncertainty surrounding them. And Dunham just wipes out Doug Bowden like it's nothing. And you could clearly tell it was deliberate based on the way that he clearly came down and tried to force Dunham. Trying to force Bowden into the inside wall. Bowden, obviously, at that point, completely lost control once he smacked the fence and couldn't do anything, Like, only thing he could do was kind of just let the car go straight and back into Dunham and send him hard into the outside wall. And it was just incredibly stupid, incredibly dumb, and it shows that Dunham has the demeanor sometimes of a petulant schoolgirl. Like the immaturity from him when things didn't go his way is just off the charts. And that's not even taking into account the incident he had earlier with Chris Barrymore, where he was frustrated with lap traffic all night. They weren't moving out of his way, which, side note, lap traffic is never obliged to move out of your way. It's not like there's blue flags constantly and they have to get out of the way immediately. No, like you have to make the passes on them just like everyone else. And Dunham clearly wasn't happy by that. And eventually he just gets fed up with that and he just completely fences Chris Barrymore. It takes him out of the race. Feel really bad for Barrymore because right as that team is starting to build momentum, here you go, another DNF and a mangled race car that's not even his fault. Like Barrymore is just, that Vibe team is just kind of cursed this year. Feel bad for Tony Domal II as well. He was an innocent bystander in that entered the night third in points and he left at 7th because of that incident. And yeah, so combine that incident, combine that with what he did with Bowden, I think that a one race suspension minimum should have been on the cards because, again, the Bowden incident just shows how entitled this kid is, entitled and privileged for that matter, just not thinking about anyone else but himself. And that was a really, really ugly moment. As I mentioned, absolutely despicable from Dunham. And it proves that he hasn't learned anything from last year because this is the same exact stuff he was doing last year and he kept getting away with it. And I get that he's getting reprimands, he's getting warnings, now he's getting probation. But someone needs to drop the hammer and suspend this kid already so that he finally gets the big picture. Like, this is unacceptable. You cannot keep doing this. And you cannot keep whining and chewing out your race team that's trying to help you out. As I mentioned, this kid is incredibly entitled, um, incredibly disrespectful. He has zero manners, but his on track performance continues to. His on track performance is the reason why he continues to get away with this. And at some point, those chickens are going to come home to roost. And again, like people are not going to tolerate this forever. People didn't tolerate it from Diego Urquidi for forever, you know? And it's just I really hope that I don't want to see Dunham become a bust, but if he cannot grow up, just grow up and mature just a little bit. Like I thought he kind of had the first few races of the season. He really hadn't been involved in many incidents, but last night was really bad. That was a brutal watch and it was an ugly watch. And yeah, like I said, I think that his team owner, CJ Barrymore, needs to have a long, long chat with that kid and just let him know like this, you can't keep doing this. This is just simply, this is unacceptable. So, like I said, I think the punishment was definitely too light. I think that they should have suspended him for a race. And if it's not the ASC, I think the team should suspend him for a race because the entitlement right now by Dunham is just it's out of hand. And yeah, so that's it for that situation. Let's talk about the Craftsman series though. Will Moon is the first series regular to win a race in 2027. Who would have seen that one coming? Um, I feel like we're watching Will Moon 2.0 this season. Like the Will Moon that we're seeing right now compared to the Moon that we've seen in the past 3 years with Rodney Woods Motorsports, like this is a completely different driver. And you look even at West Virginia, he qualified extremely well. He was really fast in practice. I think he topped a practice session, and then he just had a horrible start to the race and never really recovered from that. But he had good pace leading up to that point. Just had a terrible start and never got the track position back. But this week he has a good start. It's 1-2 early for Michael I Racing. And then Chandler Mills got by him. We'll talk about Chandler Mills briefly in a second. But yeah, after Doval and Mills ended up wrecking, Moon took the race lead, and then he had to deal with some more adversity because the pit crew lost him 2 spots. So that's a big slap in the face for Moon. But notice for Will Moon, he's not berating his team. He's not berating his pit crew. He's not going in on them. He was silent over the radio, didn't have much to say, didn't really have much to say all night. Just kind of sat back behind the wheel and handled business. Got by Ryan Dixon on the restart, eventually tracked down Garrett Hood, kept pressuring the rookie. And finally, with 10 laps to go, he finally got Hood to crack. Hood smacks the outside wall, and Moon drives on by like it's nothing. And yeah, the rest is history. And I think that certainly you have to look at this race and consider Will Moon a serious title contender, to say the least. He's only 9 points back of Jordan Reynard and Zach Trenton, only 4 points back of Zach Trenton, for that matter. Trenton had an awful night, total non-factor, was multiple laps down, but he did finish top 10. So at least for Trenton, you got to hand him that. Still got a top 10 finish out of the deal, but lost a substantial haul of points to Reynard and to even Will Moon. But yeah, I think that Moon to win a race like this, the first kind of statement this season, I would say major championship statement that, hey, I have race winning pace. A lot of you guys don't. So to do that, I think is huge. And yeah, if this Will Moon continues to show up, I'm not going to apologize for what I said, that Moon is the most mid driver in the Craftsman series prior to this season. But if this Will Moon continues to show up, then yeah, he's absolutely a real deal title threat. And we can really start talking about him potentially moving up the ranks, considering Brent Renard has been absolutely abysmal this season, and Lucas Sambert obviously off to a slow start as well. But Sambert finally starting to get things figured out a little bit. But Renard specifically has not been good. He obviously just signed a 2-year extension, but I would imagine that at the end of that extension, there's going to be an opening in that 19, and who knows, maybe Will Moon ends up taking that spot. I don't know. That's a long ways out, though, considering we're talking end of 2029 for that. So, but yeah, Moon's got to obviously keep it up, but it's certainly promising for that 18 camp, finally returning to victory lane for the first time since Denver 2023. I want to talk about Chandler Mills as well. A lot of people are labeling him Walmart Caden Dunham. I don't think that's the case. I think that Mills is not malicious in his intent to race guys like that. Dunham is deliberate. Like, he has a talent to race cleanly, but he just deliberately wrecks people just for the hell of it. Mills, I think, is a guy who gets his pace for being directly on that limit. And that means he has to be reckless to be fast. And I think you like that if you're Ronnie Woods Motorsports. You don't like him, obviously, getting into Doug Bauer to take you out the race leader. Like, no, you don't like that at all. But you do like a driver who does have the pace, but is a bit reckless, because you can mold that. You can definitely mold that. Like, look at Laquan Scranton and kind of early in his career. Like, he was the exact same way. He was fast, but he was reckless. And they eventually molded him into the driver he became before the feds got him. I would say a similar thing with Diego Orkidi. You know, he was raw, but he was fast, and they eventually molded him into the driver that he became now. You know, not all drivers just come out the box like a Todd Kidd or a Colin Ward who just get it right away and they're perfect. Like, you know, there's a lot of Chandler Millses in the world who, you know, are only fast because they're a bit careless, they're a bit reckless. And I'd rather have that over a driver who just doesn't have the pace to be up there at all. And I will say, though, their other rookie, Garrett Hood, Garrett Hood needs a little bit more pace, but the racecraft of this kid really, really promising. And he definitely seems to be obviously the more finished product, the more cup ready product at this stage in his career. They're both 18, so I don't think they're going to be in cup anytime soon. But at this stage in his career, you know, like, Hood is definitely the more polished product, whereas Mills, I think Mills is definitely faster between the two drivers, but again, he needs to be taught that racecraft, or otherwise he's going to end up like Marcus Edwards, who we're going to talk about here in just a second. But yeah, Chandler Mills, kid's got a lot to learn, but he's really, really fast. And for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, you take the fact that he's really, really fast and you teach him what he needs to learn, and you mold him into being, you know, a Laquan Scranton rather than a Marcus Edwards. And let's transition to that. Let's talk about Marcus Edwards not returning to Dexter Yancey's Motorsports in 2028. And this was inevitable, obviously, considering his performance the past year and a half. Like, he started last year 5th in points, and then everything just went completely downhill from there. He just has not gelled well at all with his new crew chief, Wendell Brock. Like, they have speed on a weekly basis. They clearly have pace. You see it. Like, West Virginia, even this year, they had pace. And Edwards, over one lap, fantastic stuff. He qualified outside pole at West Virginia. Like, he proves on a week in, week out basis, he has pace. But the racecraft is not there at all. It has yet to develop. It did not develop from his rookie year. In fact, I think it even got worse from the end of his rookie year to a sophomore campaign. His racecraft got worse, and it certainly has not developed from his sophomore year to this year. He's still the same driver he was coming into He's still the same driver he was coming into the ASCA, coming into the cup level, I should say. He's fast, but he can't finish races. So what's the point? And this is what I warned about with Chandler Mills. Like, you don't want him to become this, where he has the raw pace to be up there consistently. He doesn't have, Edwards does not have the generational Laquan Scranton type pace for Dexter Energy Motorsports, but he clearly has the raw pace to be the team's franchise driver. But the racecraft is not there. And if the racecraft isn't there, then the results are not going to be there. And clearly the results have not been there. And it's certainly disappointing for Edwards because, again, he's a driver that I feel like should be so much better than what he is. He reminds me of Devin Smith in a lot of ways, and that he just never developed. He just truly never took that next step that he should have taken. And yeah, so I do think though that another team needs to take a chance on him. I think that if you give him a change of scenery and someone takes the time to properly develop him, I don't know how much more you can develop a guy who's going to be 25 years old next season, but he's still relatively young. I mean, I guess 25 is kind of grandpa years in the ASCA landscape, but he's still relatively young, only 25 years old. Like, I think you could spend a couple years developing him. I would love to see. I don't know who is going to take that chance on him though, but considering the rides available are mainly rides at big teams, and I definitely don't think a big team like an Orkedi Bros Racing or a CJ Barrymore Racing should take a chance. Maybe CJ Barrymore Racing, yes, since they're going through a rebuilding stage, but I would not want to see Marcus Edwards and Caden Dunham on the same team. That I think would be an abject disaster. So never mind on the CJ Barrymore Racing front, but for an Orkedi Bros Racing, no, they should not take a chance on him. No point, because he needs a couple years to develop, and they're obviously all in to win a championship right now. Edwards is not going to fit that bill. So, yeah. Where does he end up next year? I have no idea. He could step down to the Craftsman series like we've seen a Nick Painter, like we've seen a Cameron Barrymore do. Maybe he goes to trucks. Maybe he goes back to the ADRS. I don't know where he goes from here. For DAM, it's also interesting because they really don't have a prospect, I would say, that's even remotely ready to step up to the cup level. So maybe they get into the Cameron Atwood or the Carson Smith sweepstakes, try to sign one of those guys onto the team, because you look at their prospects, Noah Booth is just as raw as Marcus Edwards, except he has much less pace. And then Gavin Lawson is essentially a pay driver at this point. He's fine for the Craftsman series, and fine in the Craftsman series equals a back marker at the cup level. We've seen that experiment play out time and time again. So, yeah, I think Edwards deserves a second chance in the ASCA. I think he will get a second chance in the ASCA, specifically based on his raw pace alone. Someone's going to try to develop that pace into something. I think there is still something there. It's just he's never developed from his rookie year. The promising end to his rookie year, he was on the level of Colin Ward, compared to right now, where he's even worse than he was at the end of his rookie year. So, yeah, it's just disappointing for Edwards. Such a waste of talent. And hopefully, like I said, he gets another opportunity and he makes the most of it, because I think the talent is certainly there. He needs to develop it. But let's talk about Belltown. And we kick off the ASCA's annual home state swing this weekend at Belltown Speed Park, the half-mile short track. If you thought Orlando was chaotic, Belltown is going to be something, to say the least. It is going to be something. So we'll kick things off with the Craftsman series. Take a look at this entry list right now. The Cup drivers entered in the race are going to be Aiden Romo, Carson Smith, defending Cup Series champion Brandon Bennett, and oh yeah, Caden Dunham. I can already tell you right now, it's going to be a battle between Bennett and Dunham for the race win. I can already see this coming. The 54 and the 60 teams have just been in a league of their own this season. I know the 60 was nowhere to be found last Friday night, but that was Ian Adonde behind the wheel. You put Caden Dunham behind the wheel of that race, and he probably wins by 10 seconds. So yeah, Dunham versus Bennett on Friday afternoon. That's going to be must-see TV. I definitely tune into that. If you're interested in seeing those two go at it. But if you're interested in watching Craftsman regulars go at it, you're not going to see many of them up at the front of the field. But it is a big opportunity for Jordan Reynard, Zach Tretton, Will Moon, Garrett Hood. They're all kind of right up there in the point standings. I would say those four are your main title protagonists at this point in the season. Survive the chaos. That's my word of advice to those four. Survive the chaos, because this could very well be a moment where we see a massive swing in the championship. If one of those four gets involved in some sort of accident or something happens to one of them, that could drop them not out of title contention, because again, we're only going to be 5 races into the season once the checkers fly at Belltown next week. So we got a long, long ways to go. I mean, at this point last season, Matt Chamberlain was leading the point standings. So, it's not going to bump them out of title contention, but you certainly don't want to get behind the 8 ball like this so early into the season, especially as these guys have kind of separated themselves from 5th place, Theo Russell, Ryan Dixon, and the likes of Travis Wolf. So I want to keep a close eye on that quartet atop the point standings. But in terms of the race win, it's going to be a battle between Bennett and Dunham. I can almost guarantee that. And I'm going to take the reigning Cup Series champion 10 times out of 10. Not to take anything away from Caden Dunham, but again, we saw what he acts like when he sees a little bit of adversity. Bennett coming off a Craftsman Series sweep of Belltown last season. I got Bennett getting the job done. So there's that. That's also Bennett's first Craftsman Series race of the new year, by the way. And then you look at the Cup side of things. It's going to be an interesting race. So Ronnie Woods Motorsports was defeated for the first time in 2027. But I think they could easily go 5-6 with Todd Kidd. Todd Kidd is going to be right up there. He's won at Belltown multiple times. He's going to be a factor again. He finished 6th and extended his points lead again. We need to talk about him this episode, but he now has a 21-point lead over Graham Darty with no finishes worse than 6th all season. Like, Kidd just continues to be outstanding. I don't see how that changes this week unless he gets caught up in another accident, kind of similarly to what happened to him in 2025. But I think that Kidd is going to Kidd's going to show up, he's going to show out, and he's going to be a factor to win. I think he finished 2nd or something in this race last season. This was his first top 5 of the year last year. Greg Healy won this race a year ago. He's certainly going to be a factor. A pissed off Brandon Bennett is going to be a factor. Obviously, the defending winner at Belltown. Mind you, this is Bennett and Kidd's first trip to Belltown since what happened to conclude last season. That's going to be extremely fun. I'm sure that's not going to be brought up 11 times during the broadcast. I'm looking at Cameron Atwood potentially going back-to-back. He's a former winner of this race back in 2025. Yeah, I think it's going to be between our usual suspects up at the front. Healy, Atwood, Bennett, Kidd. Those guys are going to be right up there duking it out, all Cup champions. And between those 4, who am I going to pick to win? Also, I do want to shout out Doug Bowden as well. Bowden has terrible luck at Belltown, but if he can ever catch a break, I think he could definitely be right up front with this battle as well. But I'm not going to have him as a pick to win or anything. I'm not going to go that bold. But between Healy, Atwood, Kidd, and Bennett, I want to take a ticked off Brady Bennett this week to bounce back and score his first win of the season. I know he has to be fuming after what happened. Obviously, at Orlando, he was a lap away from a historic three-peat. I believe he'd be the first driver in the modern era to pull off a three-peat. He was denied, obviously, by Diego Orkedi and Cameron Atwood. So, yeah, I've got Braden Bennett bouncing back, getting the job done. And it's not a championship statement unless Todd Kidd wrecks. If Todd Kidd wrecks, then we're having, and Bennett wins, then we can talk championship again between those two. But Bennett's going to need some help to get back in title contention, to say the least. But I think a win is certainly going to be part of that help that he needs. Like, he can only do so much unless he's wrecking Todd Kidd himself, which I'm sure he does not want to do again and get himself back in hot water. So, yeah, I think Bennett gets the job done. He needs a win desperately to get himself back in the fight. I think that he gets it. Especially after how close he was at Orlando a week ago. But that's it for this edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, signing out, and we'll see you after what should be a chaotic weekend of action at Belltown.